You won't believe what one HOA Karen did to me. Imagine owning a peaceful lake that's been in your family for years, your quiet getaway, your slice of nature, a place you poured your savings into. Now imagine waking up one day to find out your lake has suddenly been labeled as community property on a neighborhood map without your permission. That's exactly what happened to me. And who is behind it? Karen. Not just any neighbor, that neighbor. The one who thinks every rule was made for her to bend, and every quiet corner of the world should answer to her clipboard and HOA title. It all started with a neighborhood meeting where I noticed my private lake was mysteriously included in the community trail guide. When I asked questions, the board danced around the topic. But Karen? She smugly insisted the lake benefited everyone and should be accessible to the whole HOA. The audacity wasn't just frustrating, it was illegal. But what she didn't know was, I had a plan. One that would turn her little scheme upside down. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I started digging literally and legally. I uncovered a loophole in the land ownership records. Turns out, a narrow plot of unused land one she never paid attention to connected the only access road to her property, and it was up for sale. You can probably guess what happened next. This wasn't just about property. It was about standing up to someone who thought control meant entitlement. And when I closed that road, let's just say Karen's face said it all. But that wasn't even the final move. What happened next not only changed my relationship with the neighborhood, it changed the entire HOA's future. And trust me, Karen didn't see it coming. Stay tuned, because this story's just getting started. The thing about Karen was, she didn't start out as a full-blown problem. At first, she just seemed like a nosy neighbor always asking questions that weren't hers to ask. Always just checking in on people's yards or commenting on how the grass wasn't cut to regulation height. But after she got herself voted onto the HOA board, things changed fast. Suddenly, she was printing out rules that never existed, handing out warnings for invisible violations, and walking around like she owned the entire neighborhood. That's when I knew my lake might end up in her sights. The lake itself had been in my family for decades, tucked away just beyond the edge of the subdivision, clearly marked on all the old survey maps as private property. It had no formal trails leading to it, no public parking, nothing that even remotely suggested it was shared land. But somehow, Karen got the bright idea that because the community liked it, that meant they deserved it. And once she added it to that HOA newsletter and hosted a lakeside picnic without even asking, I knew she wasn't just overstepping. She was testing how far she could go. I started getting strange looks from neighbors. Some asked if I'd finally opened the lake. A few even thanked me for making it a part of the community. I hadn't done any of that. Karen had. And each day it went unchallenged. Her lie became more believable. So I started reading every page of the HOA's charter, digging through property records and tracking down old plat maps. That's when I saw the tiny strip of land barely wide enough for a road leading straight to her driveway. It was listed as privately owned but never developed. And best of all, it had just gone up for sale, with no buyer in sight. That's when the idea started forming. I didn't waste any time. The moment I saw that strip of land listed, I called the number and set up a meeting with the owner. Turns out, it belonged to a retired couple who'd moved out of state years ago and didn't even realize it still had value. They were more than happy to sell it to someone who had a use for it. I made an offer on the spot, signed the papers, and within a few weeks, that access road, Karen's only direct route to the main street, was legally mine. But I didn't do anything drastic. Not yet. I just waited and watched. Meanwhile, Karen was doubling down. She printed glossy brochures for a so-called community improvement plan that featured my lake front and center. She pitched it at the next HOA meeting, talking about paddleboat rentals, and public benches like it was already city property. Some neighbors clapped. Others looked confused. I stayed quiet. The real twist came when I got a call from a local contractor asking about permits for the lake beautification project. Apparently, Karen had submitted my property as part of the HOA's green space upgrade without my consent. That's when I knew she wasn't just bold, she was reckless. And reckless people make mistakes. At the same time, I started hearing whispers from other neighbors. Some were getting tired of Karen's power trip. One guy, Dave, said she fined him twice in the same week for a trash can being visible from the street. Another neighbor, Priya, told me Karen yelled at her kids for drawing chalk art on the sidewalk. Little things? Maybe, Lee, but they were starting to add up. I could feel the tide shifting. But I also knew Karen wouldn't back off quietly. And with that access road now in my hands, I had a move to make. I just needed to time it right. Because when I did, it would change everything. The final straw came on a Saturday morning, just as I was enjoying coffee by the lake. I heard voices laughing, shouting, and when I walked to the shoreline, I saw a group of families setting up chairs and coolers like it was a public park. Kids were already in the water. At first, I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding. But then I saw Karen standing at the edge with a clipboard in hand, waving like she was hosting a grand opening. I walked up and calmly asked her what she thought she was doing. She smiled and said, "We're just using the new community lake. You know, for everyone's benefit." She even had laminated signs that said Lake Access HOA members welcome. That was it. She had crossed the line, and she was doubling down like she had legal ground to stand on. I didn't cause a scene. I just turned around and walked back up to the house. That same evening, I sent out a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA, backed by my property deed, and made it clear that any unauthorized use of the lake would be considered trespassing. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to stop her. Not yet. What Karen didn't realize was that the access road she used every day, the one she thought was part of the public easement, was now fully under my control. Quietly, I began preparing. To close it, I filed the necessary permits, contacted a contractor, and even consulted an attorney to make sure everything I did was above board. No drama, just facts and paperwork. Meanwhile, tensions in the neighborhood kept rising. More neighbors came forward with their own stories of how Karen had made their lives harder. The mood was shifting fast, and people were watching closely. Then came the night I installed the gate. Not locked, not blocked, just a clear sign that change was coming. And early the next morning, as Karen rolled up in her SUV, everything came to a head. Karen slammed on the brakes the moment she saw the gate. She stepped out of her SUV, eyes locked on the bold sign that read, "Private drive, no trespassing." You could see the confusion twist into anger almost instantly. She marched up to the gate like she still had authority, rattling it with one hand while dialing her phone with the other. I watched from the porch, coffee in hand, saying nothing. Within minutes, 2 HOA board members arrived, clearly caught off guard. They had no idea the access road was ever in question, let alone sold. Karen tried spinning it, claiming I was blocking a public route and threatening legal action. But the truth hit hard when I handed them copies of the deed and permit. They went quiet. Karen didn't. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, the second twist hit me. A notice from the county showed up in my mailbox, of formal inquiry into whether I had restricted emergency access to a public rights-of-way. Somehow, Karen had filed a complaint claiming my new gate endangered safety routes for fire and medical responders. It wasn't true, but the complaint meant I had to attend a zoning hearing and prove everything was legal. She wasn't backing down, she was doubling down with bureaucracy. Now it wasn't just about a road or a lake. It was about reputation, legality, and the fine line between private property rights and community influence. Karen had shifted the battle to the county level, and I knew she was hoping to drag this out until I slipped up, and while I prepared. For the hearing, whispers spread across the neighborhood. Some backed Karen out of fear. Others came to me in secret, offering support but asking not to be named. It felt like the entire HOA was teetering, caught in the middle of a quiet war. And the real showdown hadn't even started yet. The zoning hearing day arrived, and I walked in with every document, photo, and map I had carefully gathered over the past few months. Karen was already there, seated up front in a sharp blazer like she was ready for court. She spoke first, confidently, presenting her case about community access and safety concerns, acting as if she represented the entire neighborhood. But what she didn't expect was what happened next. I calmly laid out the timeline, how the access road had been listed for sale, how I purchased it legally, and how no official public right-of-way had ever been designated through that land. I showed the permit approvals, the site surveys, and even an official statement from the local fire department confirming that emergency services had multiple routes into the neighborhood, and my gate didn't block a single one. The room went quiet when I revealed an HOA email thread leaked anonymously that showed Karen had pushed the community map edits herself without board approval. She wasn't just overstepping, it was forging community policy. The county board ruled in my favor. The gate stayed. My property rights were upheld. Karen was warned against further misuse of authority. And just when I thought the chapter was closed, the final twist dropped. A few days later, a small group of neighbors called a special meeting. Fed up with Karen's antics, they motioned for a vote to remove her from the HOA board entirely. And in a nearly unanimous decision, she was out. But here's where it really came full circle. The same couple I had bought the road from owned another tiny strip of land behind Karen's property. Turns out she'd been unknowingly crossing it for years to access her backyard shed. And yes, it was now up for sale, so I made one more quiet purchase. Not to block her, not out of revenge. Just a reminder, when you twist the truth to take what's not yours, the consequences tend to circle back. After everything settled down, the neighborhood started to feel a little more like a community again, without Karen micromanaging every mailbox and lawn. People relaxed. Kids rode their bikes without being scolded. Families stopped by to chat. And that awkward tension that used to hang over HOA meetings slowly faded. It was like fresh air had finally been let in. As for the lake, I put up a new sign, nothing fancy, just a clear notice that it was private property. But I also added a bench near the edge of my land and let a few trusted neighbors come by with permission. It wasn't about being bitter or territorial. It was about setting boundaries that should have been respected in the first place. Some of the same folks who once believed Karen's community lake idea even came by to apologize. We had real conversations, and for the first time, I felt like people saw the bigger picture. Karen mostly kept to herself after the vote. She didn't try to push back anymore. I think she realized she went too far, and without the backing she thought she had, her influence was gone. I never needed to use that second strip of land I bought behind her house, but knowing it was mine gave me a quiet kind of peace. I didn't need to get even, I just needed to protect what was rightfully mine. If there's anything to take from this, it's that standing your ground doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it just takes patience, facts, and a little creativity. Property rights matter, but so does community. And when both are respected, everyone wins. Thanks for following the story. Sometimes real life is stranger than fiction. And in this case, it was definitely more satisfying.